Hello, everybody. Thank you for joining me for another episode of Coffee Can't Fix Everything, where I sit down with a guest and we talk about mental health over a cup of coffee or tea. You know,
Yes.
if you're about that tea life. Um, Today, I got somebody. I think we've been connected for a minute.
Yeah.
It's just been cool to see what you've been doing from afar. Um, and thank you so much for being here. I really appreciate it. So today. This won't come out for a while, but we're recording this November 12th.
Yes.
So there are a lot of emotions,
Yes.
but I don't want to necessarily focus on the elephant in the room too much. But also, I know you have a leadership background, or you're leading right now,
Yeah.
and you're trying to lead. I don't know how big your team is, but people are looking at you,
Yeah. Yeah.
right?
It's interesting because I think that oftentimes when you like walk into leadership, especially when you're doing it just because you want to serve,
Right.
you don't really think about the things that come along with leadership.
That's so real.
Yeah.
'Cause I get be so excited to be like, yes, let's do it,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
then like everything that comes to that, you're blinded by the passion a little bit.
Yeah.
How do you
Yeah.
deal with that? Or do you
Um
go into things knowing that, or like you just like I'll deal with it later?
No, I think it's been a fine tuned process for me. So, when I stepped into the role of executive director at Sixth Avenue Corridor, it wasn't because I needed the money. It wasn't because I knew so much about this organization. It wasn't because I had just a gushing heart for nonprofit. None of that was the case. It was simply that the work needed to be done, and it was in a place where I knew that I could be used effectively to do something different. And it feels like part of a responsibility and a life calling to do so. Like, I don't feel like I would truly be living my life to its fullest potential and possibility if I didn't help others.
Ooh,
And
okay.
so that's part of kind of what I teach my kids. And so when I was like thinking about stepping into this position, I'm like not really thinking about it from a leadership perspective, but more so like a giving back and kind of volunteering type of thing is where my mind like organically was at.
Okay.
And I'm a really like do the work person. So I work well on teams. I just kind of lean into like what needs to be done. Tell me what needs to be done. Let me do it. I'll find someone who can do it. Just really putting things together. And so I never really thought about the element of like leadership or what other people would think or a platform. Like I never thought about any of that. And it wasn't until, kind of stepping into the role that you have places like Des Moines Business Record reaching out. And in my mind, I was honestly thinking like, well, what record am I setting here, right?
What y'all want?
Like if I'm just being honest, like what record did I break? What am I doing? So I just wasn't really thinking of it in that perspective. And then I'm now 5 months into the role, and I've had so many occasions where it's like, welcome to leadership. You're now in leadership.
Yo.
Thank you for leadership. People having conversations. I recently sent a family friend of ours a text message. He's my dad's friend and has been in business with him a very long time. They went to high school together. His wife and I worked together at Keller Williams. And so I recently sent him a text message and I just said, happy birthday. And he says, man, your ears must have been itching because I just had a conversation at lunch and you came up. And I was like, what? So it's those moments that like remind me like, hey girl, you're in leadership. It's
Yo.
not like this everyday active realization of I'm in leadership. I need to be a certain way. I need to act a certain way. And there's part of that like I really appreciate about myself because I feel like that's what keeps you grounded is like not thinking higher of yourself than you ought and really like remaining grounded to the purpose and the mission of the work.
Right. No, that's real. How do
Yeah.
you keep from taking that home with you? Are there moments where you have to? There are a lot of times, and this is a practice that I've had all the time, where as soon as I get home, I say to my family, "I love you." I'm putting on my I ain't going nowhere clothes.
Yes.
Because I got to get out of that mindset of
Yeah.
like I was at work. I need to transition because sometimes you could take that home.
Oh,
How do you manage the pressures of leading and maybe some of the pressures that come with your position and not bringing that into your family environment.
Yeah. That was a very much learned behavior. Okay. So, the first, up until probably a month ago, I was everything work all the time. And it was actually my husband that was like, you know what, you probably need to do this, or maybe you should try that. But I'm hard headed. And again, I am very hand to the plow kind of girl. Like, no, this has to be done. We have to do it. There's no one else to do it. I have to do it. And so that mentality kind of backfires on you sometimes. And I've never had an experience of 100% working for someone else or working for a board. So that's an experience that I really
That's
didn't have
different.
that corporate experience to bring into this. I've always been an entrepreneur. I've always worked for myself. Both of my parents are entrepreneurs. I just didn't grow up in an atmosphere where it was you're going to work for someone else, report to someone else. You have to do this hour to this hour and then shut down at this hour. Like, I had no experience. So I was doing it as if I were an entrepreneur. And that was a completely wrong like mindset and strategy to take into it. The new mindset that I have now is like, do the work, set the time, and then turn it off, because it can consume you, it can stress you, and that's why you hear about people like burning out, especially in leadership. Like, you see this burnout and it doesn't take long for it to happen. And I was like, you know what? That's not something that I want to experience.
Do the time and then turn it
Yeah.
off. And
Yep.
that is what, being who I am, understanding how hard that is
Yeah.
when you're driven one way for so long and you're conditioned to like
Yeah.
that type of mentality. Do you feel like was it mentally draining to like try to do that? Like, what was that? Walk me through that progress, because I'm
Yeah.
sure it didn't happen overnight, or maybe it did. Maybe you just like, hey, I'm clocking out tomorrow.
I will say it did and it didn't. So for the first 4 months, there was so much organizationally that needed to happen. And I was like, okay, it's all on me. So a little bit of background is I'm the only staff person at the organization. The whole rest of the organization relies on volunteers. I have never done that before. When you
Yo,
talk about grassroots, like, that is grassroots.
yo.
So everything is 100% donation, everything is 100% volunteer. And so I think it was the stress of that and being in that for the first time that made me go, 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 go. And when I honestly, I really had to take it back to like my core beliefs and core values. Like, do I trust that at the end of the day, God is going to provide? Do I trust that at the end of the day, things will get done the way they need to get done? Do I trust that God will align me to meet the people that I need to meet when I need to meet them? And it really took me back to a question of my faith. And sometimes when you get into these like leadership roles or positions, you think that you need to compartmentalize who you are, what you believe, and those type of things to do a job. And I was like, you know what? I'm not going to make it through this job without God. So in order to be effective, like, I have to allow the two to be one. And once
Yo.
I really like was like, you know what, God, if you are who you say you are, then I will meet exactly who I need to meet when I need to meet them. And I tell you, from that moment on, I've not experienced stress in this role. I've not worried about where the dollar was coming from. People are emailing me, the money is coming in. Like, I just don't have to worry. And I was like, you know what? I am so grateful that I had that revelation early in the role and not later in the role.
You know what? I was just talking to my uncle about this today. My uncle he's like my father figure. He's the one I go to for advice. And he told me something very simple. Sometimes we just get in our own way
Yeah.
and we don't allow our faith to just guide us
Yep.
sometimes. Sometimes we can make, I be, we is me. That's
Yep.
me. I be making stuff so difficult. And it's
Yeah.
good to have somebody to say, get out your own
Yeah.
way and just, if you have that faith, just let it happen.
Yeah.
Just let it
Yep.
happen. But that's like I told my uncle said that's hard to do
Yeah.
sometimes.
Yeah.
That's hard to get out your. But sometimes this can be so simple. No, that's good. Talk me through. One of the things I wanted to talk to you about. I want to continue the conversation about the leadership and the stresses that comes with, but also the disappointment within that as well.
Oh, goodness gracious.
Walk me, walk me through that. What does that look like for you? How do you deal with that?
Yeah. So I've been in a lot of executive level roles as an entrepreneur and even leadership roles pretty much my entire life because of the passion that I have for things and because I'm not afraid to like get my hands dirty and do things. And so for me being a very driven person, disappointment is hard.
Man.
When you are a type A go getter and you hear the word no, that is like the
Ooh.
worst thing.
You say no to me?
I can't, I literally can't. Like, it's like I'm not thinking, I just can't comprehend the no.
Right.
To me, in my mind, what I hear is no, not this way. And then I start to try and find another way. Or I hear no, not this time. And then I'm waiting for another time. I don't hear no, period.
Right.
Like, that's not really in my vocabulary. That's not really how I
Right.
operate. I am that driven. And so I think that piece of it has been really, really hard because I oftentimes also have this idea that success is kind of linear. Like it's a straight path and I should be able to do steps one, two, and three, and then bam, success. And I've had to learn success is not linear.
Right.
Success is not steps one, two, three. It looks very different.
Very
Each
different.
person carries something different. Like your path is going to look different than the next person's, and you can plan as much as you want, but at the end of the day, that's when I still keep going back to that reliance in Christ. Is like I can't do some things. I can do an extent of things, but there's other things that like I really have to rely on God to help me to do.
Right.
And so I think again, really being able to take off the hat of I'm in control, I have to do this, it's all on me, and give that to God, like has really kind of helped me deal with disappointment. And it's so hilarious to me because my two kids are also kind of dealing with that right now.
Ooh.
So my 12-year-old plays volleyball and she is very type A. She's very driven. She's all about school. She's all about, like, at 12 years old, she knows the top two colleges that are for volleyball, for veterinary science. She knows where she wants to go. She YouTubes how to get scholarships from them. She is
Oh,
type A. That's my
wow.
child, right?
That's
My
copy
son,
paste.
yeah. My son is 9, and he is good at any sport he tries. I mean, absolutely anyone. Bowling, soccer, volleyball, whatever he tries, he's good at. He gets that from his dad. And this kid is so driven. He wakes up at 6 o'clock in the morning. He sets up cones, obstacles, everything. And he's out there in the backyard, hopping
Ooh.
over them, jumping over them, crawling, doing things. And I walk outside. I'm like, what are you doing? He's like, oh, I'm training. I said, where did you learn to train? He says, YouTube. I'm like,
Oh my
okay.
God.
It's his first year playing basketball, and we weren't sure how it was going to go. He is learning how to be disappointed. And he's learning that it's not all on him. Basketball is a team sport.
Right.
Volleyball is a team sport. And they're learning what disappointment feels like. And it's so tough. And it's tough, but it's funny at the same time because it's like me looking at me.
Yeah. Ain't that crazy?
It is. It is.
Because there are times my kids similar in the situation as far as being a part of team. Both my kids play basketball, right? And how they both, my daughter, she'll take a loss so hard.
Oh, yeah.
And there are times where I just want to, that's my baby girl, so I
Yep.
want to hold her, like, it's
Yep.
okay, y'all gonna win next time. But having
Yeah.
to sit back and be like, you gotta feel
Yep.
this.
Yes.
You gotta
That's
feel
the
this.
part. That's the tough part I'm talking about is like, you can't always rescue them. You
Yeah.
can't always coddle them. You can't always protect them. I'm at the stage in parenting where it's like, they have to learn from their experience, and you as a parent have to sit back and watch it. And
Yeah.
it sucks.
It sucks.
It sucks. But I just watched this lady on YouTube who's a clinical psychologist, and her son is maybe 6 or 7. And she says, I sent my son to school hungry. And so I'm like, well, let me see what this mom is talking about because what? And she says, yeah, he felt like He knew better than me. He knew how to manage time better than me. He could do this, he could do that. And he did not want to eat. And then what happens? It's time to go to school.
Oh
I have
yeah.
to let them learn from their choices and face life consequences. And that's the part in parenting, like, that's where I'm at right now. And specifically with disappointment. And it is
Yeah.
tough because, like, my kids are realizing things like, oh, hey, I'm black and brown and I go to a predominantly white school, and
Right.
now my feelings are disappointed because maybe I'm not always included.
Right.
I mean,
Things
tough
a little different
things.
for you right now.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah. And wow, that is so good. I mean, not good, but
right.
um,
But,
yes. But and it's when I think about disappointment, especially with my kids, and some of this can I think can kind of relate to myself or adults as
yeah,
well, is especially when in your heart you feel like you're doing the right thing and you're doing all the right stuff. You're training hard,
yep,
you're practicing hard,
yeah,
and then you'll get a no. And you're like, okay, you try to shake it off, you do the same thing, then you get another no,
yep,
and then it's hard enough for that to chip away from your self confidence. And then you start getting kind of insecure.
yep,
And that's one of the things that I'm dealing with my kids as well. Is like
yes,
loss after loss, or you're not playing as
yep,
well. And my daughter's playing high school ball. And she played in the fall league. And these girls, she didn't know what to do. They was just going so fast.
yeah,
And now she's like, "Am I even good at this?" And
yep,
it's like, yo,
yep,
like having her go through that emotion, and even myself feeling like, man, everything I'm trying to do is just not working. Should I just not be doing? I'm just gonna go
yeah,
apply at Walmart, and
yep,
I'm just gonna be cool, welcoming people.
yep,
You know what I
yep,
mean? Like doing that,
yeah,
and having to get yourself out of that funk, and then knowing. So now having that same experience, knowing my daughter's going through that, or my son, and just having to just sit there
yeah,
and guide them through it, but not be their savior either,
yep,
is
yes.
oh
Yeah, it is extremely tough. And the one, I don't know if it's an actual Bible verse or just a colloquialism, but it's deferred hope makes the heart grow weary.
mm,
That's the adult version. Is the longer that your hope is deferred, that's the equivalent of disappointment. Is we have such this high hope and we're continuously disappointed over and over and over, and it makes our heart sick. And
yeah,
our heart being sick is what that, okay, I'm not good enough anymore. It starts to affect your confidence. It starts to affect all these different things. And like, that's one of the things that I'm talking with my daughter about. Like,
right,
hey, it was one game. Okay, now it was two games. Now it was, there's only
right.
so much that you can do as a parent, right?
Yeah,
And it was like, okay, sometimes we do just have to sit back and feel that.
yep,
And I told her, I said, at the end of the day, you have two choices. You can quit and give up on your dreams, give up on your passions, give up on everything that you've been working this long for, or you can just keep going.
mm,
Sometimes it literally comes down to that. And I think that even as adults, sometimes it comes down to that. That's it. When you cut it and you slice it and you look at it in simply black and white, it's like, are you going to sink or are you going to swim?
yeah. And one of the things that I'm learning right now, and I got this idea from a good friend of mine, Kayla Belkinsolver, and she was talking about some of her frustrations and how she was currently feeling, and just allowing herself to sit in it because she didn't want to hide the emotions and they come out later.
Yeah.
And one, I want to get your thoughts on that, and how can you, to anybody listening, what does that look like for you to just to sit in your disappointment and
Yeah.
let yourself feel it,
Yep.
to be able to get out and then like, okay, I've had that moment. Now I know I got to get out here and put in this work because people need
Yeah.
me.
Yeah. Yep. So I've had a lot of disappointments, in all areas
Just
of life.
marinating in
Yeah, just
disappointment.
marinating, right? But I think that over time, I've kind of developed like just a pace that I allow
Mm,
myself to go through that. So I know that if it's a big disappointment, I'm going to take the day, maybe the next day, and just sit, just
mm,
relax, Don't make appointments. Don't go anywhere. Don't do anything. Don't push yourself. Just sit in that for a second and just try to just relax and let whatever emotion come. But after that, that's when it's at that fork in the road. What are you going to do?
Right.
What are you going to do? And from that point, I think for me, it comes back to like being able to pull yourself out by renewing your mind. Because through the disappointment, you allow negative thoughts to really kind of begin to seep in. Like, I'm not good enough. Maybe they wanted someone else. Maybe there was someone better. And it's this constant comparison game because oftentimes it's competitive.
Right.
What you want is competitive. And so I really started to renew my mind by reminding myself that not every path is the path. Not every path is my path. So not everything I want is what God wants for me. Not everything is in the right timing. Like there have been so many things that I've gone after very early, and I've always kind of been early, like in my life, or doing things first in my life. My mom jokingly says, like, "Oh yeah, you came January 1st. You were born January 1st because you are the first. Like you love to do things." Just at a certain time and early. I graduated high school in 3 years. I went to college early. I got married early. I had like everything I did was like done early, and part of it was being very driven that accelerated that, but some of it was just like life happened and
Right.
knowing your path. And I could not have said, oh, this would be my path at 30 something years old, but I think that by learning how to like accept disappointment and learning how to pivot, learning how to interpret the situation as maybe this is just what God wants for my life right now. Maybe this is just what I'm supposed to be doing in this season. Because there was a time, probably between having kids, starting my business, where it was like, okay, I'm very driven, very ambitious. I have connections. Like, what am I supposed to be doing with my career? Because being a mom is great, being a wife is great, but I just felt like there was more. And it was like everything I went after, I would be more than qualified. And I wouldn't even get an interview. I wouldn't even get a call back. And like 5, 6, 7, 8, 10 times through. And I was like, I am so disappointed. Like, I am clearly not meant to work. Like, what is happening to my life?
Right.
Like, God, why did I go to school? Why
Right.
did I, like, why? Like, what was the point? And looking back on it now with a lens of like wisdom, maturity, and understanding, it was like, it was a timing thing. It was not a you're not good enough thing. It's a
Yeah. It's a
timing
timing
thing.
thing.
And you have to like be able to go back after disappointment happens and kind of analyze the disappointment so that you
Yeah.
can grow from it. Because if you don't, every time you're disappointed, you'll keep interpreting it the same way and not growing from it.
Yeah. I think the reflection is so real
Yeah.
because there are times where, again, you're just disappointed about whatever the case may be, and then something happens. And I think it's always good to be like, okay, I'm in a good place right now, but what got me here?
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh, so if I would have taken
Yes.
that job, I wouldn't have been able to do this.
Mhm.
If I would
Mhm.
have if I would have said no to that, then I wouldn't have been able to do this
Yeah.
here.
Yeah.
And I think that's so good mentally to be
Yeah.
like, okay, I everything happened the way it was supposed to
Yep.
happen.
I feel like it just recenters you to reframe something that could have been a negative traumatic event of
Yeah.
extreme disappointment to reframing it into like a place of gratitude, because now every single no I am like so grateful for.
Yeah.
Like I would not be where I
Yo,
am
that's
had
that's a good point.
I mean, it
Yeah.
just if you can switch the experience from disappointment to gratitude, like that's the growth and that's the maturity piece of it that
Yeah.
like really helps when disappointment comes again. Because now when disappointment happens to me, my immediate response is it's probably not the time. It's probably not the right time.
Mm,
Probably not the time.
that's good. And that I think that will help with the other point that I want to talk about that you mentioned briefly is the pivot.
Yeah.
It being able to pivot. That's something every entrepreneur knows you're going to have the
Oh
pivot.
yeah.
The pivot foot is there.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah.
Pivot foot's real strong.
Yes.
But having that mentality of understanding, okay, this opportunity is not, I'm grateful that opportunity didn't happen,
Yeah.
and then being able to pivot. Can you talk to me more about what, how important is being able to pivot in the moment for
Oh
somebody?
yeah. The thing is, I feel like I've learned that a lot as a business owner
Yeah,
because owning a business is not a straightforward thing. You think that you have an idea, you start off with a plan, and then the moment you hear no, if you can't pivot, your business is shut down.
done.
It's done. It's over.
Dunzo.
When my husband and I back in I think 2015 or 16, we did not envision starting Brooks Homes as a new construction home building company. It was focused on rebuilding in the urban core and revitalizing districts. So now you can see that that moment's come full swing. But at the time, I had no idea, and I was just extremely disappointed and frustrated that we could not seem to get enough funding to buy a dilapidated house here and renovate. And I just couldn't understand. I'm like, we have decent income for our ages. We don't have a lot of debt. We have great credit scores. Like, I'm just not understanding. And I was just so frustrated. But
Right.
very quickly, between prayer and my husband, we went on a walk and I was just like venting to my husband. And he's like, well, why don't we just try new construction? And I'm like, we know nothing about it. That's why. Like, duh. And he's like, yeah, but maybe we can figure it out. We're both smart. We're both driven. We have resources. Like, let's just try. And I'm like, I don't know what the heck, whatever. Let's
Yeah.
if anything, the bank will tell us no, and then it's not like we wasted our time.
Right.
We go in there and the bank approves us for a great amount. And now we're like, okay, time to figure out how to build a house. But like if we weren't able to be calm, strategic, think through things, and pivot, we wouldn't be where we are today without that. And it was such a blessing because starting Brooks Homes is really kind of the thing that gave us our experience, not only in terms of like building, but learning how to work with each other as spouses
Yo,
in business, because that's a real thing.
man.
I mean, you see people all of the time who are married and they start businesses and then they're divorced and there is no business.
Yeah.
So it's like you have to go through that proving ground of it first, and then kind of go from there.
Yeah. I think the ability to pivot is definitely a learned skill, but it's also thinking of it from like a mental health perspective. You just said it. Being able to not to be able to pivot with no emotion, and what I mean by that is understanding that okay, things happen for a reason. What when it kind of think logically through
Yeah,
something and
yeah,
talk yourself through it.
yep,
I think it's a great skill not only for an entrepreneur or a leader, but just in life in general.
yeah,
Like
yeah.
there are going to be times where you're going to have to pivot on something in your life, and are you going to let the emotion of the situation take over and you do something
Yep.
that you'll later regret? Or can you walk yourself through that and come up with something, a better plan, and understand that it's just going to get better and you just got to do something else a different way?
Yeah, that's one thing that, again, like I'm working with my kids on. I'm the type of person, like when I figure something out on an adult level, I like to bring it to the kids
Ooh, that's a
level
good idea.
to teach them so that it's not something that they have to then try and learn at 30. And so, one of the things that we're really working on is staying in control of your emotions. And it was funny because I started saying that so much so that like then I noticed that my husband would adopt it, and when my kids would be acting crazy, he'd be like, "Stay in control of your emotions." And it's not saying to belittle your emotions or turn your emotions off. It's saying
Exactly.
notice your emotions, but don't let them make you make decisions.
Yes. Like, there's nothing wrong with being angry or
Right.
being upset, but how you react in that moment can dictate it can be good or
Yes.
bad,
Yep.
right? There are times where my kids will act in emotion and I will look at them crazy and they know exactly what
Yeah.
that look, you know what I'm saying? Like,
Yeah.
hey, you're going to make this worse for
Yeah.
yourself.
But you know what's beautiful about that too, especially when you do it in that way with your kids, is I have had times where my kids have called it back to me. Okay. My kids will say things to me like, "Mom, you need to be in control of your emotions." And I can't say anything because I taught you that. And I'm like, Okay, you're right. I apologize. I think I'm just hungry and frustrated.
Yeah.
And I need you to listen more. And so, even from that, like, we've started to develop like healthy family conversations that
Yeah.
just as black folks, we don't typically have.
Yo, that's that's so real. I gotta tell a story real quick because I gotta put some accountability on myself. We're playing throw burrito. I don't know if you ever heard of this
Yes,
game.
yep.
So it's whatever. Something happens. My son gets mad that he didn't get the burrito. This is early in the game, mind
Yeah.
you. Like we just started this joint. Now they're arguing. My son starts crying. They're throwing stuff.
Yeah.
I go. I start yelling.
Yep.
Like y'all suck the fun out of everything.
Fun suckers.
So then, like, my wife is trying not to laugh because she knows I'm real mad about throw burrito.
Yeah, yep.
Sounds so stupid as I say it out loud.
Yeah.
I had to sit. I had to go. I'm mad over throw burrito.
Yeah.
Okay. I had to go apologize to my
Yes.
kids, which I think is important,
Oh, yeah.
and say,
Yep.
hey, y'all aren't fun suckers.
Oh my
And
gosh.
I had to explain to how I was feeling,
Yeah.
and they're like, "It's okay, Dad."
Is that not the most humbling moment? Like
So
when you
humbling.
have to prepare your apology? I'm telling you, it's a gut punch
It's a gut
every
punch.
time.
Every
Okay?
time.
Every time. I'm like, you know what? I know why it's so difficult for kids to apologize because I'm struggling.
I am struggling.
Yeah.
But it was a necessary moment.
Yeah.
And I think the kids appreciated it.
Yep.
Not just because, oh my gosh, Dad
Right.
apologized, but it was also they learned like, okay, this is how you big kids can apologize.
Yep.
They do it's a very mature thing to do.
Yeah.
And so like it's I think it was really good on all accounts.
Yep.
I will say we didn't play throw burrito for a long time.
Yep.
But then we did, and it was they looking at me
Yeah,
like,
I'm trying to see. Is this gonna be round two, episode two?
and I was calm, everything was cool,
Yep.
no fights. But I think that's just a part of growth,
Yeah.
right? There's
Yep.
going to be times where your emotions will get the best of you.
Yeah.
But how do you even react to that?
Yep.
How do you react when you like, dang?
Yeah, I did that. I just let it happen. I feel like as adults, maybe that's the piece that we tend to go through a little bit more is that realization of, dang it, I dropped the ball. The one thing I
Yeah.
was teaching my kids, I did. The one thing that I said I wasn't going to do, I did. Like
Yeah.
that is difficult, and it's difficult because you can let like the guilt of knowing that you knew better
Yeah.
begin to eat away at you. And I think that that's something that I've had to like really learn is like we have to forgive ourselves because sure we do know better.
Yeah.
We are teaching others not to do it, and yet here we were doing it, and really apologizing to the other people with the gut punch of humility,
Yo.
but also like apologizing to ourselves like self, I kind of let you down right there.
Yeah.
The thing that we were working on I didn't do, and just get up and keep going and try again because like sometimes it's that revolving wheel of if I don't apologize, if I don't forgive myself, then I just keep doing it. And now that becomes normal. And so it's like if I can kind of put the cog in the wheel and stop the cycle
Yeah.
before it begins, like that humility piece is what really does it.
Right. No, that's so real. How do you feel like being a mother and managing a home? How has that transitioned to managing a nonprofit?
Yeah, wow. Okay, that's good. I've never even like thought in terms of that analogy, but that is really good. I think that one, being a parent in general, whether mom or dad, there are so many lessons in that that like you don't expect to carry over into certain like areas of your life, and
Right.
they really 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 do. Like I don't think there's one thing I sit down at business meeting or otherwise where we don't talk about family, and I think that's beautiful
I do too.
because
Yeah.
we're kind of erasing the lines of like again compartmentalizing things, and we're bringing authenticity to areas. And in terms of like working with a nonprofit, the authenticity is probably the most important thing.
100%.
It is the most important thing. So I no longer try to separate like being a mom, being a wife, being biracial, being from the community. I don't try and compartmentalize or separate anything about me from the nonprofit anymore, because honestly, that is the thing that really attracts people toward it. I mean, it's like, hey, I went to school with you, so now I feel
Yeah.
connected. Hey, I was your neighbor, so now I feel connected. And when you talk in terms of like donors want to feel connected. They want to know what you're doing. They want to know why you're
Hmm.
doing it. Why do you care? So
Right.
it really, being a mom, a wife, a community member, a black woman, all of the things that encompass who I am, those are the things that are really drawing people. It's not the cute little new logo that we have.
Right.
It's not
Fire logo though.
it's not
But
the mission statement. It's
right.
not all of those things. In
Hmm.
reality, in the 5 short months that I've been here, it's really been the
Hmm.
authenticity piece of people wanting to get to know me and why I
Hmm.
believe in Sixth Avenue Corridor.
No, that's so real, and I think, and I can just say from someone from the outside looking in, like without even meeting you, you can just tell,
Oh, I love that.
right? Yeah, yeah. But it's something about when people are being authentic with who they are,
Yeah.
and whether that being a mother, a father, a family person, or if you don't even have any kids, you're just
Yeah.
about that community
Yep.
life. Especially these, millennial Gen Z
Oh,
cats,
yeah.
we gonna see it.
Yes.
You like,
Yes. It's
yeah,
not hiding.
it's not hiding. We're gonna know
Yeah.
if you really like that, and I think it's very smart to say, hey, I can't be at that community event because
Yep.
my kids have practice,
Oh my gosh,
and
talk about that.
I think that
Yeah,
I
that's
think that goes a
the
long way for the
yeah,
community. Like, you
yeah.
know what? Yeah.
Yep. That is the balance piece. I had probably a really hard time because I didn't understand, or even like, it was kind of an unintentional thing. I didn't realize that 90% of the nonprofit things happen after business hours.
Mm-hmm.
The galas, the functions, the events, it's
Mm-hmm.
after hours.
All of them.
And it got to this point where I'm like, do I show up for the organization or my kids? Hands down, it
Yeah.
was my kids. My family is the most important thing.
Mm-hmm.
My children are the most important thing. I call them my first ministry. So
Right.
if I'm not doing the work of leading that team, I'm not going to be effective in doing the work of leading
Yeah.
this other team and connecting back with that authenticity. People, I think that people just kind of resonate with the momming that I do and the wifing,
Mm.
that they just resonate with that piece of it. And it's not even a fight, like to say, oh, you can't come to my event because your kid has football. They're like, oh yeah, girl, I get it. This is totally
Yeah.
fine. Totally fine. We'll see you at the next one. So once I kind of got over like the fear of disappointing others in
Right.
leadership, then it was like, okay, this is a lot easier than I thought.
Yeah, yeah, because them events be at prime practice hours,
Yes, they do.
and,
Yep.
and I got one at prime.
Yes.
Sorry,
Yeah. Yep.
I got one too at prime practice hours, so I get it. But yeah, I feel like people, especially in the community like this one,
Yeah.
like people know,
Yep.
and if it's not real, I think it would be received differently.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? No, that's good. So as we start to close out, one of the things I ask, my guests, if there's one thing you can give to a listener or somebody watching, what's one thing they can do? In our case, we're talking about what we're talking about. What's one thing they can do to improve, whether it's they're feeling disappointed or dealing with disappointment? What would you say to them?
I would say to improve your process and your journey in disappointment, I would say to really find your anchor. Like, what anchors you? What are you anchored to? What beliefs are you anchored to? What are your non-negotiables? What are your core values? Like, who do you believe you are? Set that as like your primary foundation, and then anything that comes against that, you have to just knock down. If you believe that you are gifted, if you believe that you are talented, if you believe that you are worthy, if you believe that you are special, let that be your foundation. And anything that comes to oppose those beliefs, you have to just brush off. I saw this kind of analogy that was like a duck in rain, saying you have to develop the back of a duck so that the negative thoughts and comments of the rain roll off of your back. You don't absorb them, you don't wrestle with them, you just simply allow them to roll off of your back. And if you don't know who you are, what you stand for, what you believe about others and yourself, you can fall prey to a lot of things internally that stem from disappointment.
And we're going to drop the mic there. Yes. Hey, thank you so much
Thank
for
you.
being here. I appreciate it. Everybody, like I say after every episode, I won't stop. I am not a therapist. If you need support, there will be resources in the link to the description of the podcast and on YouTube. Thank you guys so much for being here. This is Coffee Can't Fix Everything. We can't do everything, but we are going to have the conversation and break the stigma one coffee at a time. Holla at you next time.